Hi, folks. You're welcome to this conversation here with us. It's a purely African conversation, and it's focusing on it. It's going to be focused on the practice of African culture. You know, African culture is broad. Yes, we know, but we're going to look at it. We are going to talk this story. We're going to unveil the story in 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 series, bit by bit. So today we are going to look at the practice of African culture, and we're going to look at the African culture as a tool in building, peaceful and development-oriented communities, because we believe if the African culture, is properly put into practice, properly practiced, it can contribute enormously towards maintaining, towards enhancing peaceful communities and development-oriented communities. So, firstly, um, uh, most, if not all, the problems amongst Afro people, both on the mother continent and in the diaspora, stem from one fact. It stems from the fact that Africans, at some point in their history, were rudely cut off from their way of life. Every human race, lives within its culture, and it is culture that defines or shapes everything about any group of people. Our focus here is on Afro people. Afro means black, right? So our focus here is on Afro people and on Africa. And so to erase any ambiguity, it is important to highlight the fact that the African continent is made up of the black or the Afro people dominantly, right? But of course, there also exist sprinklings of other races on the African continent. But the focus here is on black African culture. And we are going to begin with, let's take a look at the most important unit in African society or in black African culture. The most important social entity in Africa is the family unit. And while the nucleus of the family is the father and the mother or mothers, that is in case of polygamy, and their children, that is the nucleus. But the traditional African family doesn't restrict itself to this nucleus. The traditional African family goes way beyond that. So the traditional African family will see us talking about uncles, it will see us talking about aunties, it will see us talking about second cousins, third cousins, and much more. So the traditional African family goes way beyond just the nucleus. Okay, the nucleus here, of course, within the African context, the nucleus means the father, the mother, or the mothers, because African culture is polygamous. A man gets married to more than one wife, so it's an aspect of that Afro culture. So, like I was saying, you have families. All these African families originate from the nucleus, yes, which I just defined, but not restricted to that nucleus. It's bigger, and all is recognized as family. So in an African culture, my brother, it doesn't necessarily mean, brother in the Western sense of it. By the Western sense of it, I mean the way it is perceived, say in Western Europe, in the United States of America, in Canada, in the West. To an extent, African culture and this structure, this tendency to recognize huge families as part of family is not peculiar to Africa, but it is, the importance of it is it is most observed, I believe, on the African continent. So to better illustrate this, let's take a look at an example of the structure of a typical African family. Yeah, the structure of a typical African family, and how the family, an African family, how it originates, how it begins, and how it grows, because there is a way that a typical family originates and grows. So let's take a close look at it. So to better illustrate this, let's take a look at an example of that structure. That structure begins like this. Let's say the typical structure of an African family, it cannot be uniform all across the continent, right? It will not be uniform, but let's try to give it shape. Let's see. Yes, it's not going to be the same all across the continent. It alters. So, but let's give it shape. In a typical unadulterated traditional setup in the northwest region of Cameroon, let's try to look at this as have a reference point. In a typical unadulterated traditional setup in the northwest region of Cameroon, a man gets married to a wife or wives, and the man constructs a home. The man constructs a home, and we call this, what we call a home here, traditionally a hut. Yes. So he gets married to a wife or wives and constructs a hut, or builds a home or a hut from material gotten from his immediate environment. You get it? So the building material that he's going to use to build his hut, he's going to build his home, come from his traditional environment just around him. And he is helped in the construction of, in the construction process, in the construction of his home, by almost everyone in his community. Yes, everyone participates in the building of his home. So it is always this collective effort, to do things that are being done. And in some cases, the community, friends, and in most cases, age mates, friends, relatives. This is seen not only in the northwest region of Cameroon, it is typical in a traditional setup in the Igbo lands in Nigeria for age mates to come together in times of need to help an age mate. Maybe in the building of his new home, maybe in the doing or carrying out of helping him in one thing or the other. So the notion of age mates coming in to help another age mate, it's something traditional and not peculiar to the northwest region of Cameroon. It's not peculiar. Okay, basically, that's how it begins. So now, farmlands, because we've got to live on something. So traditionally, we live on our farmlands. We live off our farms. And farmlands are always a good distance away from the home. And farm huts are usually constructed by farm huts. Farmhouses, they are usually constructed on farms. And the farmhouses have a couple of functions, but the major function is for storage of food, crops, that is harvested from the farm that cannot be directly transported home. And these farmhouses usually have better storage facilities than in the homes. So, and they have rudimentary methods. They have some basic methods of preservation, you understand, that have proven over time to be successful. And when these crops are harvested, they are stored in these farmhouses. And of course, it's the farmhouse. The function is not only the tendency to. It's not just for storage of produce. It's much more, because in the farmhouses, sometimes people can go to the farms and stay in farms for like a week or the whole weekend, or like for 3 days. So in these farmhouses, of course, there are beds, a bed or two for people to sleep. So now, that is for people who depend on farming only. But of course, you also have other activities like hunting. So people have farms a distance away. Another important activity is hunting, traditional activities, So some people also engage in hunting. And hunters, they usually have hunting areas and, traditionally. And when they go, it is normal and sometimes possible that hunters go far off for hunting and maybe just come back, say, in a day or two. So these facilities like farmhouses or houses that are away, from your main home, they have so many functions. And the harvest that comes, the proceeds from farming or from hunting or from whatever, are stored in these homes that are away from, their main homes or their compounds where they live. And there is this tendency, therefore, to always have homes away from the home, so that when you go hunting, when you go farming, you have the tendency to get your crops, you get them harvested, you get them stored, and you get them, like, you take, for example, like maize, which is a staple crop in those parts of Cameroon where I'm using as my point of reference. When maize is harvested from the farm, it is transported immediately. If it can't be transported home, it's taken immediately to the farm seed or the house that has been built in the farm or the hut. And then there are facilities that have been put in place where these crops, can be preserved without any fear. So when a child grows up, the child doesn't stay forever with the parents. So when a child grows up, what happens? When a child grows up and is matured enough to take a wife or wives, they do so and construct their own homes. They construct their own homes, usually not too far away from the homes of their parents. So their homes are usually not too far away from the homes of their parents, but they too construct their own homes. They don't live in their parents' home. So when they are matured to take a wife, they construct their own homes or their own huts, not too far away from the home, from that of their parents. And if the matured son, due to any reason, decides to construct his home far away from that of his parents, it's possible, it happens all the time. So if he decides to construct his home far away from that of his parents, he will throughout his life, right, always identify himself with their main compound. And this main compound is traditionally called the big compound, yes, because it's like the origin, the roots, that is the original compound that these children will constantly be referred to, be identified with. So he will always make sure he will always make sure his children, identify themselves with the big compound. This identification process is also seen in the naming of children, This therefore explains why it is common practice for someone to ask the question, whose child are you? You get the focus. Whose child are you? In the process of being introduced or being presented to people, you'll get somebody asking a question, whose child are you? You get it? So the emphasis is not usually on who are you, but the emphasis is on who is your father? Because that is the way to get you identified and then link you with a particular compound. So people are identified through their big compounds. Yes, they're identified through their big compounds. And this pattern of family growth is maintained with the continuity of the family lineage maintained through the male children. since the girls are married off to become members of other families. Yes. So the family lineage and its continuity is maintained through the male children. And families eventually grow to become very huge and influential in their respective communities. Compounds usually have names. Yeah, compounds have names. And once their names are mentioned, the identity of the person, of any person from that compound or village, is easily ascertained. You get it? So once your name is called and you say, I am this, the son of this, and you give your father's name, which is a name from your compound, a name which identifies with a particular compound, everything is known about you. The person talking with you will immediately know just everything he wants to know about you by the mention of that important name which identifies with a particular compound. So families eventually grow to become very huge and influential in their respective communities. Compounds usually have names, and once these names are mentioned, like I said, the identity of any person is, the identity of your identity is immediately ascertained just by the mention of the name, your name or your father's name. Let me quote an example. If you find yourself in, let's restrict ourselves to a village called Jotun in Noni, in Bui Division, in the northwest region of Cameroon. This village, in this village called Jotun in Noni, in Bui Division in the northwest region of Cameroon, there are huge and powerful compounds. Excuse my pronunciation, I may not pronounce the names of the compound rightly, but that's besides the point. You have a compound, for example, like Enfonti. It's an area. Or you have a place like Elaba. You have a place like Kenengti, amongst many other compounds, that are spread all over in Jotun, in Noni. And Noni is a tribe in Bui Division in the northwest region, made up of villages, and Jotun is just one of the villages. Now, if a child says his compound is Elaba, immediately you come from Elaba, there are names that when you call those names, even without saying you come from Elaba, people will know that you come from Elaba. Now, all the children from Elaba do not necessarily live around a big compound in Elaba. They're scattered all around in Jotun. Some stay in another part called Sheti. Some stay even right up in the neighboring ethnic groups called Oku, like around an area called Simon Kou, and some are found somewhere around Kumbu. Kumbu, that's the capital of Bui Division in the northwest region of Cameroon. So what do these children do? All of them, no matter how far they go, they identify themselves with Elaba. And traditional rites, initiations, installment of compound heads, when that is supposed to be done in any of these breakaways that have settled elsewhere from Elaba, the head, family head, who is referred to as the Bofa, leaves the main compound and takes charge of the installment of any family head in the breakaway compounds from Elaba. So this tells you how that recognition. So the children break away from the main compound, but they identify with the main compound throughout their lives. And they tell, when new children are born, they are told orally the story of their roots and how they traveled before they got settled in their new settlements, and where they come from, and who are their brothers. And so when they meet their brother, irrespective of where they meet their brother, they will know that that's a brother from the same family compound, from the same big compound. So you have, I use Elaba as a compound in Jotun in Noni, a very big compound, because it represents exactly the picture of what I've been explaining. So you have children from Elaba who are settled in different parts of Bui Division in the northwest region of Cameroon. Some are settled in the Oku subdivision, which is a neighboring subdivision. Some are settled around Kumbo, like I earlier said, which is the capital of Bui Division. Some are settled in another village called Lassen or Lan, which is another village still in Noni. And all these children, they know that they came from Elaba. And they identify with Elaba. Do you get it? So that is just an example. So the examples abound, many. So a compound can grow into a large community, as the children spread out. Yes. So as the children spread out from the main big compound and build their own homes, you see the compound grows into a huge community. Like I already drew our attention to the case in Jotun in Noni, and I've been highlighting on the case of Elaba, and now still back in Jotun, there is an entity called Bonti. Bonti is more than just a compound. That's why I was talking about compounds growing into large communities as the children spread out from the main compound and then create other compounds. And these compounds, the children will grow from these compounds as you go again and create other compounds. So the network keeps growing. But they know how the trend goes, and they can always identify their history, and they will know that this brother left from here and settled here and created another compound. This brother left from here and settled here and created another compound. So it keeps growing, it keeps growing, it keeps growing. So it grows into, so you have a whole clan of people who originate from one nucleus, which was just a compound. And all of them, in each and every village, they know their story. And they can identify with their story. You get it? They can always identify with their story. And they know. They communicate, even without necessarily speaking. They see signs, they listen. And the names, indicators. So, I refer to a huge entity in Jotun called Bonti. Bonti it's a group of people. It's a group of people who identify with a particular root and origin. It makes some sense, right? They identify with a particular root and origin, but Bonti is made up of many compounds. But all of them have something that hooks them up together because they know that their roots is one. They are hooked up. They are one people because of their story, because of their roots. And the origin and growth of any, of communities, or, the family, how it starts, how it grows, how it spreads out, and all of that. Summarily, that's what we were taking a look at. And this is a very important aspect about, about family implantation, growth, and spread. So that was it. So compounds grew into huge, huge communities. Like through the case of Bonti in Jotun, it is more than just a compound, but it springs up from the same root, and they grow up, and this group of people they've grown into a very huge community. Like it has grown into a huge segment of the community, Bonti in Jotun. And with all the children identifying with Bonti because of their common roots. They know that their roots are common. So this is not restricted to this particular village that I pinpointed in Bui division in the north region of Cameroon, in a clan called Noni, or in an ethnic group called Noni. No, this is a reality that is reflected all across the grasslands or the northwest regions of Cameroon. And this is an unadulterated reflection of how African families grow, black African families grow. So, identifying people and knowing exactly where they come from is extremely important in African communities. It is extremely important and goes far beyond simple identification. It is equally an inbuilt system of security which comes naturally. It's an inbuilt system which comes naturally. So, an inbuilt system of security. So, immediately you meet some people. Some people just meet you in their village. It is possible that this person might be from your village and you may not know that person. So it is your duty to ask the person, hey, how are you? Because it is traditional to greet everybody that you meet. How are you? Whose son are you? Or who is your father? It is already not just that desire to identify, but it is already something which is intuitive. It is already a step being taken to know who exactly this person is. Is this person a stranger? Or does he belong? But you don't ask the person, are you a stranger? No. Whose father? Who is your father? Or whose son are you? Whose daughter are you? The answer to this question clears up a lot of things. But when the answer to that question is not appropriate, the next question will be, you certainly do not come from these parts. And of course, and it goes, and that polite, decent conversation that goes on provides one, identification, two, not just identification but security, because you need to know exactly who is coming into the community. So, and that security is a responsibility also that is collective. Now, communities in Africa, otherwise referred to as villages or even tribes, are built on this model that I've been presenting. So families dominantly defined by big compounds make up villages or tribes. These communities can grow into huge residential areas. They can grow into very huge residential areas that can eventually be referred to as townships with metropolitan characteristics. You know, this is because I talk about metropolitan characteristics because people keep moving, you know, people keep moving and resettling for one reason or the other. But there is always an original, traditional structure that governs people from a tribal perspective. Some settled groups slowly get themselves, you know, integrated into the governing structure of the communities that welcome them. Communities welcome people who come in and settle. So when you come in and settle, for one reason or the other, because people keep moving, you know, you have nomads, you have nomadic tribes that are settled all over in these areas that I'm making reference on. So they get integrated into the communities that welcome them. They learn to speak like them. You understand? And they get integrated into the governing structure of the communities that welcome them. But their original identity always remains tagged to them. You get it? So their original identity always remains tagged to them. Now, let me give a case in point. Let me get back to the area where I've been using as reference since we started our conversation. If you go to Noni in Bui Division in the northwest region of Cameroon, if you go to the villages like Jotin, you go to Jotin, Noni, you go to a village like Kor, Noni, you're going to find settler groups that are recognized and that have become part of Noni. They speak Noni, right? But they're identified. They are always tagged with where they came from. Their origins always accompany their identification. You even have nomadic tribes like the Fulanis, the Akus. So all these people, when they come and they get settled, you have nomadic Fulanis who are settled amongst them with their trademark occupation, animal, they keep animals, cows and things like that. And they have their own names of their own rulers that they came with. They're called Ardos. And Ardo is, of course they are chieftain, but they come, they settle on the land. They get acknowledged. Their presence is acknowledged. They get integrated into certain structures of the land, but they are always, tagged with their roots and their origins. Many cases about these examples abound. If you go to a place like, if you go to the Nso land, the name of people, the name of somebody is a reflection, is always a reflection of where the person came from. Meaning that, yes, in the Nso land, Nso is one of the biggest, if not the biggest tribes in Bui Division in the northwest region of Cameroon. And the naming of people, when you listen to somebody's name, the name tells you the history of that person and where that person came from. So naming is not just identification, but it's an inbuilt form of security. It's an inbuilt form of providing people with information that can serve to identify and as well can serve or can provide information that can enhance, the implementation of security. So basically, we've been talking quite a lot during this our first meeting, and we are going to stop the first part of our conversation today. But this is just, the first part of a series of conversations that we are going to be having. And if you're opportune and if you have any question, you always have the possibility of putting it down on our comments. If you have questions, you will have the possibility of putting down these questions. And in our next meeting, we are going to provide, we are going to provide comprehensive answers to your questions. And in our next meeting, we are going to be looking at, leadership and spirituality, in Africa, from the African perspective. Leadership viewed through African eyes and spirituality from the African perspective. It was honestly a pleasure having you here today, and we will be looking forward to seeing you again during our next presentation.